Hello and welcome. Joining me today to share the stories behind the 10 books that inspired her the most on her life journey is international family patterns expert, systemic coach, trainer, facilitator, and motivational speaker Judy Wilkins-Smith, who helps families, individuals, and Fortune 500 companies do something we all need, which is to decode our emotional and organizational DNA to break through limiting cycles, resolve long-standing issues, and transform challenges into lasting breakthroughs. Judy, welcome.
Hi, Sandie. It's lovely to be with you today.
You too. Judy, you not only grew up with books, and you regard them as your best friends, but you also say that you actually feel and taste words.
It's interesting that you remember that. Yes, I worked with Milton Erickson's daughter. He's, the hypnotherapist, and she said to me, "Oh my goodness, my dad would have enjoyed you. He used to taste words like you do." So yes, words mean not just a lot to me, but I notice that people tell the powerful stories of their own lives and the lives of those who came before them. Every time they open their mouths, they're tattling on their family system or they're talking about their organization. And so words are very important. They're one of the keys to decoding who we are.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about taste in words, because when I come across a book that I fall in love with, for me, it's like having a really good meal and you're savoring all of the words and the way people string words together. So yes, I can understand a love of tasting words.
Absolutely. I really do. Yeah.
So what was it like for you having to choose just 10 from all the books that you've read?
Whew. Gosh, interesting because there are so many, and I'm still sitting going, what do I do? Which ones do I love? It was difficult because different ones have meant different things at different times for me. Uh, but these were the ones that I felt like are relevant for me now, were relevant then, and still are now. And just pieces that I think woke me up in different ways. Some more, some a little less, but they were really, really good friends.
Well, the work you do is quite specialised, and it's not your run-of-the-mill everyday kind of job. So I imagine that these particular books that you've chosen must have really spurred you on this particular journey.
That, you know what, again, good words that you chose. Spurred on, I think, is what I look for in books. Do
Mm.
they ignite me? Do they take me past my level of comfort? Do they kind of rock my world a little bit? And do they say to me, keep going? Because we all have this. There are times when I look at the work I do and I go, do I really want to keep doing this? The answer is yes, but does it have value? Does it have purpose? Especially when you have those odd ones. My daughter always says you have 99.9% of the people who really love what you're doing, and you've got that point one. And what do? We gravitate to the point one, right? And
Mm.
I think what I've learned from them as well is the point one is actually saying to me, there is something more for you to look at or something more to grow.
Yeah. Mm.
But these are books that have really kind of said to me, come on, keep going, you can do this. There is another level. There is another level. And I think that's the other piece for me. Is the minute I find a book that speaks to possibility, I'm in. I
Yeah.
want to know what the possibility is, and I want to know what do I do with that and how do I get there, which is why I wrote the book I did. I wanted people to be able to go, sounds nice. I suppose 1% of the population can do it. We're all messed. No. And these books spoke to me that way. It was really, hey, reader, if you're willing to come along, we can learn something together.
Well, let's start with your first book, which is one that we've had a couple of times, but not as often as I would expect. And that is Excuse Me, Your Life is Waiting, The Astonishing Power of Feelings by Lynn Grabhorn, which was published in 1999. What was it about that book that stood out for you?
Her practicality. I think for me, that's a very good thing. I love magic, but I like practical magic. And this
Mm.
was practical magic. She really got into the power of feelings, what they can do for you, how they can take you further on a journey. And I do have to say, using those feelings has allowed me to key into one of the most important ones, which is gratitude. If I'm having an off day, which thankfully doesn't happen often, I will go on a gratitude walk, because I know when I can start connecting to the feeling that makes me get a grin or a smile, I'm starting to elevate. I'm opening my heart. My brain is switching back on. The frontal lobe is doing it, and I can feel my gut settle. So I'm coming back into a state of cohesion. She did that for me right from the get-go with her story about the baseball kid, the one who's standing there and he keeps knocking it out the ballpark, and she goes to him and says to him, how? And he says, I feel the connection before it's happened. And I think what that did, and you'll see that as a theme with many of the books, is I began to realize, even if you look at some of the Christian prayers, the Jewish prayers, all of those, it's about giving and getting. But the key to it is you give first and then you receive. And there's a very common Christian one that says, for what we are about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful. We're giving thanks before we get. So it was that keying into and understanding that feelings, far from being these things that we were taught to suppress and not have, are powerful. They are really the pieces that keep you on the path. And by the way, they connect into the quantum field. That a lot of this is how you get there. So I loved her very practical stories that made me laugh as well. And I like that. I loved that she was saying, and it's something that, again, I say over and over when I teach, transformation isn't for the chosen few. It's for those who choose it. And that was very much a message of this book. Come on, you can do it. It's not rocket science.
Important distinction, those who choose it. The next book on your list sold over 50 million copies.
Nice.
Yeah, and wouldn't we all love that? And
Yes.
It's been translated into over 25 languages. The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mendino, which was published in
I've got goosebumps
1968.
talking about it. Yeah.
Mm.
It was one of those timeless pieces where you get to understand that there is more to life than we think. That there is this divine energy or bigger energy than you, or your bigger energy, whichever one you want to go into. But that if you're willing to take a journey, God, the guides, the universe, whatever you want to call them, are willing to play with. And I notice this, the universe is highly interactive. He also combined a very deep and mystical journey, and really related it to your own journey, your inner journey. I think he was probably one of the first times that I began to sense that what I needed wasn't out there. It was in here, and it was part of who I am and who I will be and become, but it was also part of what came before me. I'm deeply linked. I'm speaking about it, wonder if that's not something that factors into the work that I do. Is I look at every person I work with as not in, and I want to be cautious about this, not in a down way, in a really elevated way, as a superb being with a remarkable life if you know how to see it. And it's not this weighing down, having to suffer your way to transformation. It's truly beautifully remarkable. And this just captured it so beautifully.
When did you come across this book? When did you read it?
Goodness, it must be about 30 years ago, maybe. It may be less, but I would guess maybe about that time.
How did you find it?
With books find me. I've had that from very tiny. I would walk into the library, and I think they would line up and sort of pop out as I needed them. You know, in the library, you could take, I think it was 3 books, and if you were a master reader, you could take 6 books. And by goodness, I love goals, so give me my 6 books. But I really was hungry for something more. It was super boring for me to imagine that life on earth was get born, have a mother, have a father, have kids. That's it. Done. It just didn't add up.
I was looking up the book earlier because it's not a book that I've read. I certainly intend to put it on my list
Oh,
now.
it's beautiful.
But so many people said this is it's ostensibly a book for salespeople, but it isn't. It's
totally
also
not.
claimed to demystify ancient understandings and bridge the gap between science and spirituality.
So I love, again, the words you use. The demystifying is really what we've done for a long time, is, again, said to people, only the chosen few. It's not. It's those who choose it. The demystifying of the ancient wisdoms is interesting, again, because it ties into the work that I do, is taking ancient wisdom and really making the unconscious conscious and the invisible visible, which is what he does and what this work is about. But it's making it accessible for all. It is a timeless piece. It is masterful in its simplicity. It is something everybody wishes they could write. He taps into such a sense of presence, of holiness, of sacredness, of possibility, that you find it's a little bit like Rocky. You know that thing where he stands at the top and everybody jumps up in the theater? It's that me too. And he's saying, you too, of course.
Why do so many people call it a book for salespeople?
Well, theoretically, it's not a shabby thing. Yes, you can sell. And in fact, the Go-Giver, which is also on my list, is ostensibly for salespeople. What he's tapping into and what the Go-Giver taps into is, you can be the biggest, highest, tallest, smartest branch on the tree. It doesn't come with what you do. It comes with who you are. And it's something we don't realize. You could do a lot. And believe me, when you get onto this path, as you know, you will do a lot. But the powerhouse comes in who you are and how you're willing to be authentic and be seen, and be authentic for yourself. Really be authentic for yourself. It taps into your deepest longings and your highest desires, is what that book does. It's just stunning. And when you get to the end of the book, I will say, for me, it took my breath away. It was one of those, and I know I've read something profound, when I, who speak a lot, I can't for about 20 minutes. It's just
Speechless, yeah.
Don't talk to me. Don't stop whatever's flowing here. I need this to stay where it is. Just, I've gone somewhere. I've actually walked through a door, and it's not a door I'll be able to walk back through. And this is one of those. In fact, the other one that I would say that pairs with this, that isn't on my list, is Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Brilliantly simple, utterly shape-shifting and almost shaking in its profoundness.
Yeah. Well, you've sold me on it. Let's look at number 3, which is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself: How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One by Joe Dispenza.
Yes. So
you're a big fan of his.
I'm a very big fan of his, and I'll tell you a couple of reasons. Number one was that people kept saying to me, is this Joe Dispenza's work that you do? And I said, no, I hadn't even met the guy or been to one of his events. But people keep tying it into, except that he doesn't always look back, which I do. He looks forward. But people who would go to both would say, we shift in similar ways. We go through changes that we can't undo and don't want to undo. And I think that the biggest similarity is it's highly experiential and totally embodied, which is what people love, because if you can have that sense of an embodied shift and that profound aha, it changes you. And they kept on comparing us. Now, I'd had a card that was sent to me in the mail, never had a look at who it was from. I put it on my desk because I liked it. It had this blue sort of figure, and what it said was, you cannot get up the same person who sat down. And he's referring to meditations. I didn't know it was his. But I got pretty ill. This is now about 4 or 5 years back. Got pretty ill, and I was teaching in South Africa, but it was a scary pretty ill. And I would go to bed at night and pretty much pass out, not go to sleep, pass out. And I kept thinking, it's okay if you can keep your mind on where it is that you see yourself, where you want to be, and you can hold it, and your brain and your body can work together, you will be okay. You will be fine. I knew that we were capable of healing our own bodies, but this was an acid test of that. And so this card was there. I came back, I looked at the card. Somebody called me and said, hey, he's doing an intro in Tampa Bay. You should go. And I went, I'm too busy giving classes to be able to attend one. When is it? And it happened to be the one weekend that I was open. And I flew down, walked into it. And you know when you walk into a room that somebody knows what they're talking about. And he spoke for about an hour or so, and then he started getting into some of the practical applications, and he'd spoken about the brain, made a lot of sense. And I had a profound experience, which I actually pulled back from, with the breathing that he does in the particular meditation, which is not this calm, quiet meditation. It's extremely dynamic, and it's motivating and igniting. I had a sensation of being in another world. It was a very clear light up. But my last thought as I was about to go into it was, I'm not going to be the fool on the floor lying around and squirming. Stop. And I shut it down. And it took me probably 2 more to go into it and go, let's see what this is. And I knew that he had something that added to what I have, or is, I wouldn't even say added, it's complementary. The two really do well for each other. But what he has, again, is the practical magic. I think I come back to that over and over. The practical magic of, hey, you've got neuroplasticity or neuroplasticity. Your brain is not hardwired, people, old idea. You can wire it the way you want to. And when you do, things are going to change. And they're going to change vitally. And so in his first book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, it really is, it addresses in my world some of the hidden loyalties, some of the old ties and limitations, and how to move beyond those. He uses meditation a lot. That's his kind of main base, which made me laugh because I hadn't been a meditator up until that. And when I went to one of his classes, there's an advanced class, and you go in and he says, today we're going to do a 4-hour meditation. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do 4 minutes, guy. But he is so masterful at what he does with those 4 hours that I sort of came back into the room 4 hours later thinking it was 20 minutes later. And again, it was just to keep building. He offers a way to keep building. And I think that's what I value about his books. All 3 of them, you'll see me go into them, but it's in the title, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. He's really saying to you, is yourself enough for who you are, the way you define yourself, or is there more? Let's go and take a look. And I like that. And he was the one, you spoke earlier about science and spirituality. You know, the two are very close relatives. In fact, they're cousins or maybe even brothers and sisters. They simply pretend not to know that they belong every now and then. They belong very deeply together, and he brings those together as well. When you begin to understand that your life's adventure is a profound adventure and you can have a profound adventure, everything changes. And I knew that and saw some of that in this book.
So you've given a pretty good description of what Joe Dispenza does. What did you find in the next 2 books that you've included of his? You Are the Placebo, Making Your Mind Matter, and Becoming Supernatural. What did you find in those that you didn't get in the first one?
I would say with the first one, like anything that happens, you kind of eat it like junk food. I know often I will eat the book and come back a year later and go, how did I miss that? I never spotted that before. What was this? So I kind of ate the first book. The second book, You Are the Placebo, I think really spoke to me because of the situation that I had. And I'd known that the brain can master the body, but that often the body is in control of the brain. And so it was getting that balance back. It was also watching people come in with physical situations to an event and watching them right there and seeing changes and going, how have we not? I mean, again, in the work that I do, it's with words. This is with neuroplasticity and the neural pathways, which is also in the work that I do. But it gave it a language. It gave me an increased language that I hadn't had before, that I could really use in my own work to say to people, we're laying down new neural pathways. In fact, I'd started speaking about neural pathways and how we lay them down that quickly if we have a trauma. You can ask the person, they will tell you the colors, the situation, the scenes, the people. We forget that we have the ability, and he didn't show that, but for me, it was a pickup. We forget that if you elevate, if you are grateful and you really elevate those emotions and feelings, you can lay down a neural pathway equally quickly in the opposite direction, yes. The triumphant neural pathway, the winning neural pathway. And we call that, and you see it at events that I offer, you see that internal wiring happening right in the moment. I had someone yesterday who said to me, I don't know what's happening to me. My thoughts are changing. And why does my body feel buzzy? This is something we're just not used to. We think there's something wrong with us when it happens. There is something profoundly right. We just haven't learned to key in. And you are the placebo. I would love to say to anybody on a physical journey, if you want to know that you're not stuck, you're not lost, your condition is not hopeless, you can do something about it. That's the book that you want to get a hold of. You will teach yourself health from the inside out.
And Becoming Supernatural, of course, was contained a lot of stories of people who literally had changed themselves.
Exactly. So if you look at Becoming Supernatural, I would say I smiled because I'm aware that the one thing about somebody who changes themselves is that they often don't want to speak about it. They've done it. They know it. There's something that's there. They don't necessarily want to speak about it. And I had to grin because, as you know, I've been working with Kate, who's a superb editor and human being. And when I wrote the book, she kept saying, what are your stories? What about you? And I kept saying, it's not about me. But I think I realized in the Becoming Supernatural how important our stories are. And it's going to sound odd because I'm not particularly religious. I'm more spiritual, I would say. But there is that thing that always struck me about the hem of Christ. When he's walking along and somebody touches his robe and he says, who touched me? I felt something leave me. And what he was actually saying, when I look at it for me, is there is energy between us. And when my story touches you, it doesn't just sit with me, it leaves me and it belongs to you now. What will you do with this?
Tell us a story of something that happened to you in one of Joe's workshops and how it changed you.
So, yeah, there are two. One that happened way before, and then the one that I was telling you about with the whole tummy thing that went skew. So they had said to me, you need to come in for tests. And I said, give me 6 weeks. And in that 6 weeks, I went to one of the workshops and then I went to an advanced workshop. And I told you about the card that was there. And we went into a deep meditation. And as I came out feeling really good in my body, there was a picture up on the screen in front of me, and it was that card. I still go, wow. It blew me because I realized in the moment that I'd been taken care of before I even knew I needed to be taken care of. And that time was totally not linear. It had been given to me way ahead of the time I would need it. And I've since found that that happens quite a lot. My daughter's masterful at that. She'll give me something and say, you need this. And I go, what am I going to do with that? And lo and behold, a week or 2 weeks later, that very thing will crop up. And I think it was not just having that experience, but it was seeing that picture in front of me, which was such a validation of, you've shifted. Well, it took me probably an hour or 2 hours before I could speak. I couldn't. I connected into a sense of belonging, which people describe. I've had it once or twice before, but that sense where you're connected to everything. And there is a love that is so powerful that you immediately understand that you want to not be the individual, but part of that, even though you will always be the individual. And it was, I think at that point, understanding you don't get to say anymore, I can't, I'm a victim, it's not possible, because everything is possible. And there is always an answer. You just have to be willing to go and find it. And I think for me, the most important piece, because we all sit in the victim's shoes at some point, was recognizing that it was going to keep me very well justified, but exceptionally limited. And it wasn't going to make me happy. And it wasn't going to serve those who came before me, nor would it honor the ones who came after. And that happened during that one of those meetings or one of those events. It was a little startling. I'm very cautious about endorsing, but when you see something that is profound, you don't get to shush about it. You just don't.
Yeah. Okay, so book number 5 is The Go Giver. You mentioned it briefly before. A little story about a powerful business idea by Bob Burg and John David Mann.
Yeah, I actually have it right there. It's one of my favorite books to give to clients and to business people who say, I want it all and I want to be at the top. How do I do it? This again is one of those books that is theoretically a sales book, and it's given to lots of salespeople. And it's going to sound odd, but it occurs to me it's very much like Disney World, and I'll explain why. You know that I love Disney. Anybody who missed it, there's my Mickey. But I love Disney. You can see Disney as a superficial, commercial, money-making, gimmicky, most people or many people do. I don't. The first time I went to Disney, I cried for a week when I had a look at what was possible if you actually committed to something bigger than yourself and really went for it, and how many people it would benefit. This little book is the same. You can read it and say, that's nice. It's cute. Nice ideas, good old authenticity, good values, service. But if you really, really read this book, it teaches you that to be an incredible salesperson or person, period, that means you've got to invest in yourself, being your spirit, your soul. And the only way you truly get ahead and come out saying this was incredible and what a wonderful ride was to be in service of others. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter how you're playing or what the field is. If it is in service of others and it's empowering even further that, hey, take a look, you're not just your boots. The result is flow. And of course, the result then is going to be better sales and better money. The other thing that I loved about this little book was that it keys into something that is personally super important for me, which is money is not a transaction, and money is not dirty, and money is not ugly. Money is a friend, it's a relationship, and it will play with you, serve you, discipline you, teach you as much as you will allow it to. It is a very spiritual flow. And this book was one of those that keyed into it. So to Bob Burg, it's my profound thanks for giving money as well a really good, decent place and it belongs there.
So you talked about your love for Disney.
Yeah.
Book 6, The Ride
Book
of a
6,
Lifetime.
Bob
Lessons in
Iger.
Creative Leadership from 15 years as CEO of the Walt Disney Company. Bob Iger, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Love Bob Iger. Love Bob Iger, miss Bob Iger. I know there's a time to come and a time to go. I wish he would circle around and put some more pixie dust there at the moment. But Bob Iger, I think one of my favorite. First of all, it's such a readable book. It's like The Go-Giver. It's not heavy. You can't wait to get back to this book. And you see a little bit of Bob Iger's magic in this book. In fact, you see quite a bit of Bob Iger's magic in this book. But one of the things he talks about is how sometimes your worst day on planet Earth and your best day on planet Earth can sit in the same day. And he talks about the opening of Shanghai, China. Beautiful. I'd really like to go to Shanghai Disney. Haven't been yet. It's on my to-do list. But he talks about how this was a crowning moment for Disney, a really good defining moment. And he was getting ready to walk out and onto the stage at Disney and Shanghai and launch this whole thing. And he was just feeling it. And he was pretty much standing in the wings, and he gets the news, and you'll remember this, he gets the news that a child at Disney has been, I think, rolled by a crocodile and drowned. And he said in the middle of wanting to walk onto the stage and say, look what we've done, look at the magic, he was crying with the parents. And it gives you pause for thought. Sometimes your best days and your not so best days may sit next to each other. But I think if you look at that particular story, he also shows, interestingly enough, because that's what I'm teaching this year, he shows capability and resilience. There are times when there are dreadful things happening in your life, and there is still a calling, and it's telling you, you don't get to quit right now. You get to show up, and you don't get to whine, you get to shine. If you show up, you grow up. There are times when it's not going to be easy, but it's a beautiful book, and he lists his leadership lessons at the back of the book. It's, if you want to be a leader with heart and soul, it's a really, really good book. It's one that it's again, one of my new favorites to give out, because it's so lovely to see that now in this day and age where sometimes I think we're a little jaded, there are profound leaders who make a profound difference. I would wonder, but I think Bob Iger, for all of his flaws, which of course we always have to mention because we love to look at the flaws, he had a whole lot of magic going that really, I think if Disney was standing next to him on the podium, he'd have said, thank you. You did a great job.
Well, a leader with heart and soul is the only leader to follow.
This is, I think, what we don't understand. And I know when I am facilitating at leadership events, when I'm coaching executives, it's why I love the work I do, because with the way I coach executives is to do a deep dive into the personal and the career, not just the career, because you came from somewhere and I need to understand that. But what you get to see is that everything in your family system has led to you being here, whether it's in reaction to or collusion with your family system. That's led you to be who you are. And if you truly, truly want to be at the top of your game and one of those leaders we talk about, this is when you invest in your human capital from the top down. But your human capital can only go as far as you are willing to go. And if you don't invest in your own soul and your own growth, you're going to stunt the company. You won't have the vision to take it all the way.
Very true. Very true. We'll talk about the family and how it influences us a little bit later when we reach the end of your books, because that's what your work is all about. But let's move on to book number 7, which is The Secret by Rhonda Byrne.
Well, it's been given a good rap and a bad rap and a good rap and a bad rap. But again, I think when you see what it's done for many people, it's opened a door that wasn't there. It's opened an awareness for many people that wasn't there. It tells me that there are a lot of people looking. They're really looking for practical ways. Don't tell me to go and invest $600,000 and I'm going to become a guru. That's not smart. But what are the practical ways I can do things? And when people, I would say it sits a little bit with Lynn Grabhorn's book, when you see the difference that energy makes, how it opens your heart, how it settles your gut as an inner compass, and how it switches on that frontal lobe and starts to imagine. I think this is a really powerful book. I dip into it if I'm in any particular situation and I just want a key point, just something to latch onto quickly. I will dip into that book because it gives me such good pointers. I can translate it into my own version, but it's smart, it's to the point, and it gives guidance. And yes, you're going to have people who say it's prescriptive or it doesn't. I always say this is where you use your own common sense. Take what's good, leave what doesn't apply, and move on to the next one. There are some really, really good lessons. And again, what I loved was she taps into one of my favorite words, the magic of the soul. There is great magic. We've been taught that magic is not a smart word. It's a very important word. It's part of the sacred. And I love this book for that reason. It's great.
Well, I'm looking at your list and I think we may have left one off, but we'll check that as we move a bit further down. Number 8 is The Alchemist by Paulo Qualo, which I have to say probably is in the top 10 of all of the books, that people are choosing to mention. Yeah. This one is consistently on people's lists.
Well, here's the thing. If that one is consistently on their lists, I hope they've read The Greatest Salesman in the World, because they do this. They really are in good support of the other. It's pure, it's simple, it speaks to the soul. There is something in both of those books that just goes, hey, soul, you really are remarkable. Let's show you how. Come with me on the journey. Look at these different pieces that I can show you. And I think by the end of the book, if you're not aware that you indeed are the alchemist, you are running away from what's right in front of you. We keep expecting that something out there is going to shift in society that's going to allow us to be our best selves. You may not like what's going to shift, because quite often, if you're not willing to go there, chaos is going to be what shifts you. And it is not helpful. But the lessons were remarkable. They're timeless. It's magical. With this book, I think I got to the end. I have a piece that hangs on my wall that a client sent to me. And for me, it summarizes this a bit. There are enough people telling us how it is in the world. We could use more people who tell us how it could be.
That's a good point. Very good point.
And I think for me, I'm tired of hearing how it is or how bad it is. It's not. This is a remarkable world. We need to play a good game. And if you're willing to play a good game and really invest, you can go pretty far and you can have quite an incredible adventure, because life is. It truly is. This isn't a nice cliche saying. It's when you get the alchemist, when you get that you are an adventure, and it's waiting for you to start speaking to it. The shift. So that would be The Alchemist.
Yeah. And it's true. I mean, we don't grow, we don't shift, we don't even move when things are going well. We just want to coast along and enjoy it. It's only when they go wrong or something big happens that we make that forward movement. It's friction.
Yeah, and what you've spoken about is so important, because you're right. often that is when it is. Our new learning in a new world is not to suffer your way into transformation. It is when things are going well, what more is possible? What more is possible? What can I add here? Not to coast. That's your building stage. You're building in different ways, but when things are going well, for goodness sake, start noticing what you're doing right and build on that. And that would also tie into when somebody pays you a compliment. The worst thing you could do is shut it down. They've given you a piece of information you're not keying into your graph. Stop. So yeah, I love The Alchemist for that. It's one of those books my soul needs to speak or to listen. It's Mendino, it's this one. They all have pieces.
And we do not have a book short. We actually do have 10. There was a miscalculation there and a repetition of numbers. So number 10, the last book on your list, is No Waves Without the Ocean by your mentor, Bert Hellinger.
Of course, yes. Bert was, I say was because he's passed, but his work, of course, is timeless. But he was the one who took, often when we have an approach, if you look at Joe Dispenza, if you look at Bert Hellinger, you will quite often hear people say, well, he ripped off so-and-so and he ripped off so-and-so and it's such a short-sighted way to look at things. What they did was they looked at it, they went deeply into the language, they could see an additional piece and they added that. And we would be really wisely counseled to not look at who's ripping who off, but to rather see who's building on whom and what is each step offering. So Bert Hellinger was very clear about all of the people that he'd studied with and all the pieces that he'd gained from different people like Virginia Satir, Ivan Vozomini-Nagy. There are so many. What he added to, and I think sometimes for all of us, this happens purely because you're doing so much of the work that you start to wonder, like he did, what more is possible. And so instead of sculpting people when he was exploring an issue, he stopped and he wanted to see what would happen if you just let them move if they felt to move, or offer something if they needed to speak. Now, you learn in this work that it's not about speaking to be clever or moving to be clever. There is a genuine inner system, an impulse that says, I need to say this or I need to move. Now, it sounds deeply mystical, but we're doing it every day. You walk up to somebody and say, hey, I wanted to tell you, you look good today. Why? You don't know why you did, but something called you to. I don't even remember where I was, but on one of the journey, it was in Nashville. I went to Nashville quite a lot at one stage to work with a particular company, and they would send a driver to come fetch me. And this guy took me to the airport. We had a long talk, and I think at the end of the talk, I said something to him, something to the effect of, you really need to pay attention to yourself. You're far bigger than you're letting on, and you need to understand it and do something about it because you have skills. That's all I said. And I think it was about 2 months later, I came back, same driver. And I got into the car and he said, thank you. And I said, sure, what are you thanking me for? And he said, I was going to commit suicide. Wow. We don't know, but something in you is called to. Something in you keys into the system. And Bert Hellinger somehow sensed that people who moved were not doing it to be smart, clever, or funny. They genuinely had a need where he'd placed them or where the client had placed them. If they needed to move, he wanted to know what that was about. And time and again, people would say, that's exactly what they would do. The one representing my mother would do that. So it was accurate.
Can I just stop you there, Judy?
Sure.
Because I think it would be really useful for our viewers if you explained a little bit about your work and what you're doing, because otherwise this comes out of context and it may
Sure.
be a bit confusing.
Sure. Thank you. So let's first look at the book, then I'll get into that. The book is important because what it does is it tells you that you are super important in this family system, in the organizational system, in the world. You have a part to play that nobody else can play. It's your part. So that's what this book talks about. Then it goes into what are the laws in systems? How do systems operate? How do they define you? How do they stop you? How do they start you? What do you notice? What are you seeing that is important to you? So he goes very well into family systems and how patterns that were created generations ago are still echoing down through the system, and lo and behold, they land in your lap. This is an aha book. It is a difficult textbook to get hold of, and didn't start out as a textbook, but it goes into the details beautifully. It talks about what is a mother seen as in a system? What is a father seen as? What are children seen as? How do we see different aspects of life? What is war? How does war play a part? What is peace? What are, the words you speak? The words you speak, the feelings you have, the actions you take. Why are they so important? Is it just you being a goofball or a jerk? No, it's not. And he points out here that very often didn't begin with you, didn't start out with you at all. It happened way back in prior generations, but because you have patterns that are incomplete, they cycle down to you, waiting for you to see two things. And this isn't in the book, but this is the essence of it is it's waiting for you to see two things. What is the pattern that's got you stuck? And what is the pattern that's waiting for you to liberate it? So you've got two patterns sitting next to each other. So the way that he does or did his work was a client would come in, they'd have an issue. Often he did them in groups. When I do an event, it's usually in groups. And then he would listen to the issue for a little while and he would say, okay, here are the parts of this issue. So, for example, my mother doesn't see me, or my mother doesn't love me. Choose somebody to represent your mother, someone to represent your father, someone to represent your siblings, someone to represent you. So they stand up and then he says to the client, I want you to place them in the room in relationship to each other the way that it is for you. Now, it sounds simple. It's not. It's the way that it is for this client. Remember that. And the client will place them. Maybe dad's far away, mom's really close by, or she's standing between, or he between mom and dad. And that allows you as the facilitator to start looking and asking simple questions like, why is mom so far away? What happened? Well, she was never there. Well, tell me about dad. Dad was absent too, yet he's looking off into the distance. What is that? He never came back from war. What we're doing is we're literally dimensionalizing the issue. So everything that you've held here and in your gut, we're putting out in front of you. So you now have this entire system in 3D and you start interacting with the system in 3D. Things that you had never thought of before. I have one of the ones that you see quite often is a daughter who says, my mother never sees me. And then we put the mother up and the mother looks at the floor and I ask them, was there a lost child? Is there a loss? Is there a missing person? Is there a guilt? What are we looking at here? Why is mom looking down? And I've had somebody say, oh yeah, well, mom had 3 or 4 abortions or miscarriages. She's just never been around. Well, no, but do you see where her attention is? It's with those ones. And then I'll have a client who says, oh, that's why I feel so good when I get sick, because mom sees me. And they start to make connections they haven't made before. So now you're engaging multiple senses. Seeing, hearing, feeling, touching, walking in, making connections. And this is unique to each client. But what happens is those long-held feelings of I'm not good enough, I'm always sad, I'm depressed, suddenly find a reason for being there. You can anchor them to their origins. And you then find that you can start making connections that are, oh, it wasn't about me. It's not that mom didn't see me. It's that she was too focused. My goodness, I am good enough. And it starts to rewire the feelings, rewire the brain, and rewire the body in the moment. So when you ask me to explain, this is a 3D, highly experiential approach that people often will say at the end of, how has it taken me an hour or 2 hours to resolve something I've been working at for 20 years? Well, because if you're trying to do it all here, you can't see the relationships. You can't see the tensions and the opportunities. But put it in front of you in 3D with somebody who knows how to facilitate it, and suddenly you're doing what we spoke about earlier, which was you are creating new neural pathways. And these are neural pathways that really serve. And now you're looking at mom and going, she really did the best she could. Or, you know, mom, because you weren't there, I became really independent and I'm grateful. So I often see anger turn into compassion or insight. And people who come to these events, we talk a little bit in the day and then it's a full day of this kind of work. And so even if they're not having their own piece of work done, they're having so many insights from the other pieces that are being done that in essence, everybody gets what you call a constellation.
Well, it's fascinating work, and you and I have had many conversations. We did a 6-month series of interviews about this and how it affects your money, your love life, you know, your relationship with your family, your relationship with your children, and everybody. One of the things that I read about Hellinger's book, it said in the description of the book that there is a chapter on family constellations and movements of the soul. What does that mean? We haven't discussed the soul before.
Yes. So movements of the soul. In the work that I do a lot of corporate work. And so I don't speak this kind of language until we're a good way in. Here I can do that. The movements of the soul, which Rupert Sheldrake also refers to as the movements of the morphogenic system, are when you set up a system and you place the representatives, they start to key into the client's system. It's like that thing I said to you earlier on. I walk up to you and say, you look lovely, and I don't know what's going on for you, but something pulls me. Well, this is exactly what happens in a constellation. And people will watch that. And I love skeptics. They're my favorite. Probably because I was one too when I started. And they will say, this is not possible. You can't sense into somebody's system. And they start to represent this person. And the next thing I know, I always look for it. You see this jolt in the body or this look on the face, and you know, okay, you're feeling the system. And so what happens is you may find at some point that you've placed the representatives in a certain position. And what I will do as a facilitator is I will say, if you have anything that you're compelled to say, I want you to share it with me. And if there is any movement that you need to make, I want you to follow it. And so you will see people starting to move within this constellation. And again, this brings very deep insights. If I go back to the one with war, there was a girl who came, and it's actually in my book, a girl who came in who felt so down because she couldn't reach her brother. He'd not come back the same. When she watched in the constellation, and we actually then set up, because he kept looking out of the circle, we set up people outside. He walked straight outside and went and stood next to them. And I said to her, who's that? And she burst into tears and she said, he never came back from the war. And so when he didn't, he was moving towards the dead ones. That was where he felt he belonged. When we had the conversation between the dead ones and the live one, and we could separate those out in a way that left him with dignity and a legacy for those ones, he could swing back into the circle. And her comment was, I thought it was me. So often it isn't you, but what is you is that here's the deal. I always say to people, it's all about you. You brought it. It's not about you because it's about something in the system, and it's completely all about you because what you do with this knowledge is going to change the system. It's going to change you, and the minute you change, the system can no longer relate to you the way it did. In addition to which, you're now no longer going to be repeating those ancient patterns or ancient history and creating your inevitable future. You're now creating something very different.
It's absolutely fascinating the way this works. And, I don't doubt it for 1 minute, not 1 minute. I mean, just having conversations with you over 6 months, I saw patterns in my family.
Right.
And once you see them, you can do something about them.
And they can rest. This is that beauty. What you've described is the pattern is trying to rest, but it needs to get your attention. When you've seen it, it served its purpose and it goes, now I can become wisdom, which frees you up to say, what can I add? What is the chapter that only I can write?
Yeah.
And that's when it starts to bubble to the surface.
Yeah. Well, you have put, I won't say all your knowledge, but a lot of your knowledge into a book, which is coming out next month, just over a month.
Yeah.
And the book is called Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint, a powerful guide to transformation through disentangling multigenerational patterns. So tell us a little bit about what is in the book.
So in the book, for me, as you will have heard throughout my book list, best description I can think of is practical magic. I'm not interested in being so theoretical that people can't get it. I wanted them to know that by the time they finished with this book, they would have a very good working knowledge of what a constellation was. They would have done some themselves because you could do those. And they would also have access to an inner wisdom that they could apply and understand the family system and begin to write the chapter that only they could write. So it was you spoke about the greatest salesman in the world. It was to demystify the fog. So mystify and fog are two good words to put together. It was to blow the mist away and to blow the fog away so that everybody understood. Like so many people who come and say to me, I'm the train smash, I'm the bad one. No, you're not. If you walk into my room or walk into an event, you're walking into your life. You've actually said, I'm in a box that's too small, I need to move. And that's what this book is geared to do, is to say to you, here's the knowledge you need, here's how you apply it practically, start using it and watch things unfold.
You're also doing a course, aren't you? An online course with the Shift Network on this.
I am.
Are you focusing on the work in general, or are you honing down on something
so what I'm
specific?
doing is similar sort of to the book, but not. They're very good complements, but I'm tackling the emotional DNA because emotional DNA is my specialty. It's the inherited patterns of thoughts, feelings, actions, what it does, how it does it. It's a lot of what I've spoken to you about, but really drilling down so that people understand at a deep level. You don't just inherit your physical DNA, you inherit your emotional DNA. And by the way, it's often stronger than your physical DNA. And that inheritance comes with all the keys to the locks in the doors that you're trying to unlock. And it rests with your ancestors, and now it comes to you to create the future. So that's what I will be working with.
So how long is this course?
It is a 7-week course. It is 90 minutes at a time, which of course they've had to work with me on because I want to tell everybody everything. So I could go 4 hours, but they've said 90 minutes. But what it does is it gives you the theory. It goes into an exercise that allows you to get what the theory means. And then it gives you another deepening exercise that you can do at home to reinforce it. But I guess the hour and a half is what most people are used to. So we'll go with that for now.
Well, yeah, and they've got to process it. So
well, this is super true. It really is. I know when people go away from a 4-day or a 3-day event, they will tell me this kept unwinding for weeks and months. So it's a very intense process in terms of you getting to see it, not just hear about it, you're participating as much or as little as you can, because we're different creatures. But it's intense, and then you get to unwind it, and you suddenly start to make meaning of all sorts of things that you hadn't connected.
And I know that you like to hold your public events at Disney World,
Of course.
your favorite place. When's the next one?
So the one that actually there are two, but the one before it is in Dallas, but the one that I will be doing for this year at Disney World is Capability and Resilience DNA, and it is at Disney World at the Beach and Yacht Club, and it's November 10 through 13. And I always say to people, prepare to have your socks knocked off, because this work is not what you think it is. When you come in and you discover how remarkable you are, you're going to go out and you will not be able to walk back through that door.
So do you always allow extra time for people to play at Disney World, as well as sit in a conference room and learn from you?
See, if I'm at Disney, there's no way I'm not saying hello to Mickey, not a chance. So what happens is part of the package is the theme park tickets. So every day we play hard, and then in the evening I will say to you, I want you to take this, and as you're playing tonight, look at the way that Disney's done that. Look at how they've brought that. Look at the way they always key into, and they do, into the soul, into the hero, into the hero's journey. Watch what they're doing. You can hear it at this level, or you can recognize what they are saying to you. Disney consistently gives deeply profound messages. If you look at their new movie, Encanto, by the way, Encanto is a very good one for people who are interested in this work, because it is family constellations. Yeah. And it is brilliant. It archetypes all of the different family members. It is superb. But yes, they absolutely get time to go and play, because play illuminates the soul.
Of course it does. So tell us, what are you reading now, Judy?
I'm too busy writing at the moment to read. If I were to look at anything that I'm reading, I'm still reading Bob Iger, just tapping into those pieces. He would be my main one, I guess. There isn't a new one that pops out, unless Joe Dispenza's got another one coming, in which case I would have a look. But
which would you toss off your list to make way for the next one?
Which one would I? Ugh.
There's a hard one.
What I would do. I never do that. I've been asked that sort of question before, and I have a very different answer for it. I might amalgamate Joe's 3.
There you go.
But I wouldn't toss them off. And which one would I put on that I didn't? Probably Jonathan Livingston's Seagull, because it is so good.
Well, that also comes up quite often as well. Yeah,
I mean, that book,
I think I read it many, many years ago, probably in the 70s. But it's timeless.
And this is the beauty of a book that touches the soul.
Yeah.
When you're going to touch the soul, you often have to tell a story. It can't be a how-to necessarily, although it becomes a how-to. But the story is what catches us.
So before we close, Judy, give us the date that the book is available and when your Shift Network course starts.
Sure. So a couple of things to know. The date you can pre-order right now at all of the good booksellers. It will be available June 7th. What else did you ask me? Oh, and things to know is that it is also going to be translated into 5 languages. Goodreads has made it their must-read book, self-help book of the summer.
For the summer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Publishers Weekly has also been very kind to us, so grateful for that. And
starting date of your course.
Starting date for the Shift Network is July 5th. However, people can also tap into the Shift Network because they offer a free I will be talking to Stephen Dinan on, I think it airs June 23rd. And that is for you to get to know me, for you to get to understand a bit about the work. It is about an hour long, and they're welcome.
Good. And in the meantime, people can go to your website, judywilkins-smith.com. They'll find meditations and everything they need to know.
They will. And I will say that the meditation is actually a constellation. If they haven't had one, it will take them all the way through a constellation.
Judy Wilkins-Smith, thank you so much for adding your 10 best spiritual books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
It's always lovely to be with you. Thank you for a good time.
You're welcome. And that's it for this week. If you want to get this interview on audio so that you can listen to it in your car, it is available on Own Times Radio and at all the major podcast sites as well. You can download it from Spotify and iHeartRadio, Apple, Amazon, Audible, you name it, you'll find it. That's it for this week. I'll be back at the same time next week with another edition of 10 Best Spiritual Books series. Till then, it's goodbye from me.